Why is it so orange? Oh, we're gonna be, oh, turn you off. I have another scary story for you guys. This is going to be part 2 to Jack and Lucy, a stalker in love with a murderer, and honestly, I'm just gonna get started right into the video. After a great summer, having once again spent it with Lucy, my junior year had begun. Somehow, I felt like I was living the life I'd always wanted. Lucy and I had become even closer. She told me about her family and that both of her parents were well-known surgeons. I told her about my family, which is nothing really special. My mother works as a lawyer, and my father probably doesn't even know about me. But none of that mattered because all was well. The first few weeks of school were quite relaxed. They usually tend to be. Everyone explaining what they did during the summer, friends getting together again, and new couples being formed. You see, our school has a rather annoying tradition. We have this school ball every summer. It's a big thing at our school, and apparently everyone really enjoys it. I never went since you have to bring a partner. I mean, sure, I did get asked out every single year by God knows how many girls, but I always declined as nicely as I could. Like, come on now, just imagine me at a dance with some girl I could care less about. That's not romantic at all. I'm not even into that kind of stuff. However, this year I hadn't received any requests. At first, I thought it was strange. Maybe the girls in my school had finally given up on asking. My assumption was soon thwarted after I had, in an attempt to test this theory, asked a girl from my class to the ball. To my surprise, she coldly declined. But that wasn't what really shocked me. She told me she couldn't go with me because she had already agreed to go with someone else. I asked her who she was going with, and at first, she was reluctant to answer. Eventually, she told me that she had said yes to Brad. It was then that my insides danced with curiosity. Brad? As in Brad Michaels from 3A? I asked her. She nodded, thereafter telling me she had to get back to class. Brad Michaels, huh? I would have thought nothing about it at first. That is, until I remembered that Brad Michaels from 3A already had a date for the dance. He had asked out a girl named Natalia. How do I know this? Simple. Because Brad always had a crush on Natalia. And even though Brad and I weren't exactly best buds, it was obvious. But why would she lie to me? It's not like I would have forced her to go with me if she declined by saying she just didn't want me to take her. My mind scanned through the possible reasons for her lying to me. Something was definitely up. Sure, I didn't actually want to go to the dance, but for some strange reason, the fact that I hadn't been asked even once felt off. And on top of that, I was being lied to? Why were these girls avoiding me? I went home after school that day still contemplating, trying to figure out a logical reason for why this was happening. I couldn't believe how uncharacteristically stressed out I was because of something so stupid and irrelevant. It made me wonder if I was some closeted narcissist. I couldn't wrap my head around why it bugged me so much. I had to get it off my mind. So I decided the best way to do that was by alleviating stress, how I usually did. The night was still young, and the city was only an hour's drive away. I brought back some drunk blonde chick. The easiest targets are always the drunk ones. She didn't need much persuasion for me to get her to come back to my place. Once we got to my house, she was mine. As always, I gave my newly caught victim a sleeping pill-laced drink. She was already half asleep when we had gotten to my place, so the drink wasn't even necessary in the first place. But you can never be too careful, right? Her reactions and cries for help were no different from all of my previous victims. After about 10 minutes, her body and will to live gave out, much to my disappointment. Nevertheless, I had managed to take my mind off of things. I disposed of her corpse using acid, as I did with all of my victims. It was a cold night, and I couldn't wait to get back to the warmth of my bed. After I had cleaned up and fully disposed of the body, I left the basement, locking the door behind me. That's when my body froze. I felt a cold rush down my spine at light speed. My hand stuck to the gold-plated handle of the basement door, my neck resisting my commands to turn. I must be imagining things. Tell me I'm imagining things. I tried to convince myself what I had just seen was my mind playing tricks on me. Please tell me I didn't just see someone smiling at me from my open front door. I forced my head to turn left so that I could look to see if my front door was really open. As my eyes met the darkness peering in through my wide open front door, a cold sweat slashed through the pores in my skin. No way. I'm dreaming, right? I never leave the front door open. That's what I kept trying to convince myself of. But it was all in wasted effort. However, whether I had left the front door open or not wasn't the issue here. Someone had been inside of my house, and that was the last thing I could afford. But who? Who the fuck was it? My brain rapidly browsed through a list of names, while my body remained as still as a statue, and with the front door still disturbingly wide open. The only person I could think of that would stalk me was Lucy. But Lucy would never enter my house, would she? Once more I tried to persuade my body to move, this time successfully. I ran to the front door and slammed it shut. With my back leaned up against the door, I fell to the ground. That smile. That horrible smile. I couldn't get it out of my head. The vivid image of the intruder's broad smile lingered in my mind. Ironic how a serial killer as screwed up as me can get scared by something so trivial. I stayed up the entire night, thinking in the chilling darkness. It must have been Lucy. What if this whole time I had had the wrong idea about her? Maybe she hadn't been stalking me all those nights because she liked me. What if instead she was observing me? The cute and harmless image of Lucy I had so strongly cherished was now shrouded by a cloud of doubt and enmity. We had gone on so many walks, talked every day, and even spent our summers together. And yet now, I questioned if I even really knew her. Who was Lucy? But more importantly, who was I to her? The next day, I woke up determined to get to the bottom of all the things haunting me. I had come to the conclusion that the girls at school not asking me to the dance must have also been Lucy's doing. And if she knew about me, the things I've done, what was she planning to do with that information? You could say I hadn't properly thought out what I was going to do. In fact, that's exactly what it was. I got to school with only one thing on my mind. I was going to confront Lucy. I played it out in my head a couple of times, but that was irrelevant now. I boldly strolled into class to see Lucy sitting in her seat, staring out of the window, as she often liked to do. At this point, I had switched my thinking completely off. "Morning, Jack," Lucy greeted. I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed her by the arm as gently as I could, trying not to make a scene. It was still very early, so there were only a couple of others in the classroom with us. "What am I to you, Lucy?" I sternly exclaimed, doing my best to keep my voice down. It was only after those words left my mouth that I realized how stupid I sounded. "What do you mean, Jack?" Lucy replied, puzzled, with a concerned look on her face. I had come back to my senses. What the hell was I thinking? No, I wasn't even thinking, was I? If Lucy truly was the perpetrator, then me asking such questions would only give me away. I had to go about this intelligently. After all, she doesn't know that I know she's my stalker. Yeah, that's right. I'm the one with the upper hand. Jack, is everything okay?" she asked in a caring tone this time, her face still showing concern. "Oh, sorry. Everything's fine." I chuckled in an attempt to brush off the crude atmosphere I had created. "Oh, thank goodness," she sighed with relief as I did my best to smile back. That's when it hit me. There was only one solution to the dilemma. If Lucy did know about me, if she had scared all the girls away from me, if she really was a danger to me and my lifestyle, then I simply couldn't let her roam free. She could blackmail me. Or worse, what if she really was one of those psycho stalkers you read about in horror stories? She was probably planning to kidnap me and do some weird shit to me. Paranoia peeled away at my mind. I couldn't take any chances. There would only be one way to solve this problem. I had to get rid of her. I have to kill Lucy. I hadn't really thought any of this through, but it was too late now. I have to kill her. I have to get rid of this psycho stalker. So my mind was made. You know how they say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? Well, that was exactly what I was going to have to do. My heart started to punch against my rib cage. My toes felt like they were moving on their own and I had butterflies in my stomach. I don't know why I was so nervous. I mean, it's not like I was new to killing. So why the fuck was I so hesitant to hurt Lucy? This girl's a hazard to me. If she knows about me, I'm screwed. That's what I kept telling myself, to prepare for what I was going to do next. "Lucy?" I asked with a slightly nervous ring in my tone. "What's up?" she answered cheerfully. This was it. The moment of truth. I have to ask Lucy to be my girlfriend. If she says yes, then I win. At this point, my mind had already cemented the entire outcome in every brain cell. Once she said yes, I would bring her back to my place, seduce her, and then attack. It would be the same thing I've always done. She'd just be another one of my victims. It wouldn't matter that she was my obsessed stalker. After all, I'm a 6'2" athletic guy who knows how to kill. She'd stand no chance against me. "Jack, did you want to ask me something?" Lucy said with a cute smile drawn on her face. "Oh, well, yeah. Fuck, why am I so nervous? Lucy, would you like to be my A soft, quiet voice interrupted me from behind, and my nervousness suddenly turned into pure rage. Who the fuck? I was right there. I was about to finish the line. Who on this cursed fucking earth decided that they would interrupt me? I turned around to see Elijah standing behind me. "How may I help you in your most perfectly timed hour of need, Elijah?" My voice drenched in irritation. Your mom sent you some lunch. You interrupted me for that, you little fuck? At the time, I was knocked out of rhythm so badly that I didn't even question why my mother sent me lunch. She'd never done it before. She always gave me money, but I can't recall her ever having made me lunch for school. I didn't manage to ask Lucy to be my girlfriend. I guess all the adrenaline I had in that moment was lost. I spent the school day trying to come up with some kind of way I could lure her out. None of my ideas seemed plausible, and so the day ended in a failure for me. I drove to town to take my mind off of things. I'd been doing this a lot lately. I must have gotten carried away because when I arrived home, it was already close to midnight. I parked my car in the driveway and headed for the door with keys in hand. The day went by so quickly for some reason that I'd even forgotten to eat the lunch my mom made for me. Though, now that I look back, I was lucky I didn't eat it. The darkness of the night was brightened by a glistening full moon and lonely streetlights. The world seemed like it had gone mute. Not even the insects made noise. It wasn't necessarily a cold night, and there was no fog in sight, but something felt eerie. As I got to the front door and placed my keys in the keyhole, I recognized some sort of book lying on the doorstep. I was kind of tired, so I almost just wanted to leave it there. However, once more, my curiosity got the best of me. Upon closer inspection of this black book, I realized it was more of a photo album than a book. At that point, I started to feel somewhat cold. It was as if my body was telling me not to look inside, but that wasn't going to stop me. I opened the photo album to view its contents. To my confusion, the pictures had the heads cut out of them. I skimmed through the pages, doing my best not to fall asleep on my doorstep. I wasn't really looking at the photos in detail, but as I got deeper into the album, I started to notice something strange. At the sight of the last page, my heart skipped a beat. Honestly, I felt like crying. I covered my mouth to make sure I wouldn't make any noise, just in case the person who had left the album was watching me. My knees trembled. The fresh air now left a rusty stench in my nose. It was one of those moments I wish I could have just disappeared from. These photos I had been jogging through weren't random. They were pictures of me. Pictures of me sitting in my living room. Pictures of me making dinner. Pictures of me leaving for school in the morning. But those weren't the ones that left me half paralyzed. No, it was those last two pictures. They were of me sleeping. The perpetrator had not only been in my house, but they had been standing over my sleeping body. And with that, I realized how unsafe I was. I had been at the full mercy of the perpetrator, and now they were showing me this to let me know how insignificant locked doors were. I would have been completely set on the perpetrator being Lucy. That is, if it hadn't been for a photo of Lucy and I walking home from school. The whole experience had my body trapped in a state of chilling paralysis. I don't remember how, but somehow I managed to get back into my car and lock the doors. I started driving with no destination in mind. I just had to get away, as far away from that house as possible. I wanted to call Lucy, but on second thought, I decided to call my mom. This was a first for me, since I had never called her out of distress. But I was scared. Just plain scared. "Honey?" she answered. "Mom?" "Yeah, what's the matter?" I had to force back tears and try to keep my voice composed. "Mom, I think someone's trying to kill me." My mother is a kind woman at heart, despite how strict and straightforward she can be. We never really built a close relationship due to her work and me being, well, you know. However, ever since I was a child, if there was anything I needed or any support I required, it would always be her. She'd always be the one there for me, without fail or hindrance. And in this moment, I needed her more than ever before. She told me to drive to her office at once, and not to stop for anyone or anything. I did as she said, and when I got to her workplace, I was greeted by her soft embrace. I had forgotten what it felt like to be held tightly by a loving mother. It's the kind of feeling I'd imagine similar to hugging an angel. My mother contacted the police, despite me not wanting them to get involved, but I couldn't tell her otherwise, and I was sort of glad. As I slowly began to calm down, I was sent back into that pitch-black pit of fear and anxiety. Lucy was calling me, and for some reason, I didn't have a good feeling about it. "Lucy?" I answered cautiously. Hey, Jack. I'm standing in front of your house, and I've kind of rung the bell a couple times, so maybe you could open up?" She followed with a little laugh at the end. My ears started to itch. My mother listened attentively as I had to put it on loudspeaker. "Lucy, I'm not at home." "Huh? What do you mean? I saw the light on in your bedroom." My mother's face and mine went pale almost simultaneously. "Lucy, get away from that house." "What? Is it your mom? Should I tell her I stopped by?" "Lucy, get the fuck away from that house, now." With a startled and confused, "Okay," I heard her run to her moped. Now I knew for sure the perpetrator wasn't Lucy. My mother told Lucy over the phone to come to her office, where we currently were. As soon as Lucy arrived, in a moment of sheer relief, I embraced her tightly. My mother was going to fly to Florida the next day on a 3-day work trip, and I needed somewhere to stay. If this had been any other circumstance, I would have been reluctant to accept Lucy's offer to stay at her place. But with the situation being what it was, I was just thankful to have someone like Lucy. The police arrived about an hour later at our location, after having investigated our house. According to them, they hadn't found any evidence of there having been an intruder. They concluded that they'd keep an eye on the place, since there had been so many disappearances in the town nearby. Unfortunately, as you've probably guessed, those were of my doing. Though I still appreciated the cops' willingness to go through with something like this. Usually small-town cops like those guys would wave off stuff like this. They asked if I had a place to stay, and I told them I'd be staying with Lucy and her family. Lucy made sure to get permission from her parents over the phone while I answered a couple of questions. I'd almost forgotten, but I remembered to show the police the photo album that had been left at my doorstep. They were as shocked and disturbed as I was. I also gave them the lunch that my mother had supposedly made for me. My mom later confirmed that she hadn't made it for me, and then it was clear that it had been prepared by the perpetrator. Just thinking about what might have happened if I had eaten it made me nauseous. That whole time I had stood in front of my door, that sick fuck must have been watching from the dark, waiting for me to collapse, under the assumption that I had eaten whatever they had prepared for me. The atmosphere settled down again once the police dispatched from our house. I gave my mom one last hug and received a "see you soon and be safe" kiss on the forehead. Lucy and I then left to go to her place. For now, I was safe. Despite the fact that we had spent so much time together, I had never been in Lucy's house. The moment I stepped into her home, the warmth and subtle scent of lavender put me to ease. Lucy's parents greeted me right away, curious to meet me. Apparently Lucy always talked about me, so they assumed we were dating, much to Lucy's embarrassment, of course. We had dinner and got to know each other. Lucy's parents were so cool. I actually enjoyed being around them. They made me feel like I was a part of the family. Nobody had ever made me feel like that before. Truthfully, I wish that night would have lasted longer. I could have talked forever with her dad about his love for space, or with her mother about the importance of watching a good romance movie once in a while. After having eaten, talked, laughed, and indulged in one another's stories, it was time to get some sleep. Personally, I was quite anxious to see what Lucy's room looked like. I half expected there to be a bunch of pictures of me and stuff, like in those Stalker movies, but to my surprise, her room was rather conservative. A big comfy bed, a wardrobe, a sofa, chairs with some cushions, and teddy bears galore, and a desk for work. I volunteered to sleep on the floor, despite the fact that Lucy offered to share her bed with me. It was about 3 a.m. when Lucy asked if she could lay beside me. As we laid next to each other, coddled by the warmth of her house, my body started to tingle on the inside. You know, like that warm, fuzzy feeling when you get when you're happy. And that's when I chose to take a chance. We were alone together, laying within an inch distance from each other. "Lucy?" I asked without a tremor of hesitation. "Yeah? I've killed people. More than I can count. I'm a bad person, Lucy." The room went silent for a minute, but it wasn't an awkward silence. It was more like a relaxing silence. "Jack?" she asked without a tremor of hesitation. "Yeah? I killed Amy, and I've been stalking me since freshman year. And you also told the other girls that we were going to the dance, and threatened them not to ask me out." "Yeah." She bowed her head, almost as if to apologize. "Hey, Lucy?" I asked once more. "Yeah, Jack? Thanks for existing." I wasn't looking, but I could feel Lucy's face light up as she moved closer to me, the skin on her arms now touching. I could hear her heartbeat, and I presumed she could hear mine. Our hearts weren't pumping fast. There was no lust, no anxiety, no awkwardness. In that moment, something amazing happened. I felt like I had let go of a weight I'd been carrying for too long. In that moment, we had confessed our sins to each other, our darkest, most painful secrets. But more importantly, we had accepted each other for who we were. And then, once more, she asked, "Jack, can I stay with you for a while?" I turned to look into her gentle brown eyes. Stay forever. Love, I still can't truly describe it, but in that moment, I knew it was love. Everything about Lucy felt so warm. That night, I realized that I wasn't alone in the world. Lucy was with me. I stayed for an entire month at Lucy's place with her family, and well, how should I put it? I never felt more at home. I guess that kind of sounds weird, doesn't it? But I really just love being around them. The police continued to guard and investigate my house, and even though I was thankful, I was still a little nervous that they'd somehow find out that I'd killed people in my basement. Luckily enough, they didn't. I will admit though, when it came to disposing of the bodies, I was always extremely precise and made 100% sure that I would never make any mistakes. After the month had passed, I was anxious to hear about all the results of the police's investigation. Apparently, they had found absolutely no trace of any intruder or anything that even seemed remotely close to being strange. I had mixed feelings after hearing that. On one hand, I was relieved, because that meant that I was in the clear and that they couldn't find anything that would connect me to the murders I committed. However, I know what I saw, and I'm not the only one who saw it. There's someone out there who's stalking me, someone who has managed to get into my house multiple times. But worst of all, I don't even know what their intent is. Sometimes I think about what would happen if I hadn't picked up the phone when Lucy called. That intruder was in my house and Lucy was right outside. What confuses me even more though, is what the hell were they looking for? Nonetheless, after 1 month, I decided it was time to move back in. Though this time, there would be some differences. I set up hidden cameras around the house, both inside and out. I also had the locks changed, and to be extra safe, I had a new front door built which only opened by PIN code. The only people that knew the code were me, Lucy, and my mother, of course. The dance was coming up, and I still hadn't mustered up the courage to ask Lucy out. No matter what excuse I tried to come up with or how often I told myself I'd ask her soon, I never came around to actually doing it. But I wasn't about to remain a little wuss. Oh no, not me. Honestly, I've killed and tortured people. How hard could it be to ask somebody to a dance? The dance was now only a week away. Everyone had dates, and the atmosphere at school was fluorescent. You could almost smell the joy and excitement oozing out of the masses. I had never noticed just how excited everybody would get over some simple dance. It was like some otherworldly, unique event. We did it every year. At least, that's what I used to think. Now I see why the others cared so much. It wasn't just some dance, some excuse to be around girls or get wasted. No. It was a night where you could be yourself. A night next to the person you liked. A night where you and your friends could feel free. In this world clouded by expectations, anxiety, and the need to make it in life, and the judgment of others, even fellow colleagues, there were rarely moments in which we could escape these many pressures. And so I finally understood. That's what the dance was. An escape. Like the wardrobe that leads to Narnia. Even if it's just for a night, we could be ourselves. We could be happy and carefree. Thinking about it made me feel sort of nostalgic, like I was going to relive a happiness that had been lost. All that was left to do was the single toughest task I had to complete, asking out the girl I had hopelessly fallen for. My dearest Lucy. I'll admit I was fidgety and nervous that morning. I ended up getting to school late because I couldn't decide what to wear. That had never happened to me before, but strangely enough, it put a smile on my face. I got to school that morning, ready to do what I had to do. I approached my classroom door with whatever shred of confidence I managed to collect. This was an entirely new experience for me, yet I remained focused, like a tiger ready to pounce on its prey. My mind on the goal, I casually opened up the door to the entire classroom. The lush smell of perfume stroked my face, amping up my confidence even more. The night before, I had stayed up practicing how to ask Lucy out, and just like Al Pacino or Tom Hanks, I was ready to start the show. The only thing missing was my co-star, Lucy. With genuine kindness in my voice, I greeted my classmates as I made my way to my seat. Everyone around me seemed kind of flustered. I guess seeing me in such a wonderful and sociable mood was a new experience for them too. And so, I sat and patiently waited for Lucy to get to class, staring out the window, gazing at the clear blue morning sky. But that day, Lucy didn't come to school. At first, despite my obvious disappointment, mixed with a little bit of relief, I shrugged it off as her being sick. She must have been feeling under the weather, right? When I got home, I went straight to my bed and just laid there. Whilst contemplating whether I should have gone to Lucy's place after school to check up on her, I decided to give her a call, or rather, multiple calls. Now, I was getting somewhat worried. It wasn't like her to miss school, and even less so to not answer my calls. In a brief fit of panic, I popped on some clothes and drove over to Lucy's place, just to make sure everything was fine. The day was losing its light, and I wanted to get back home before it got dark. In all truth, I expected the worst, and because of that, I also brought along my trusty knife and machete, both of which I hid in my car trunk, just in case. I mean, what if the intruder was back? I knew they would eventually turn up again, but alone the thought of them doing something to Lucy, it filled me with rage and left a dreadful taste in my mouth. I couldn't and wouldn't let anything happen to Lucy, especially not because of me. However, upon my arrival at Lucy's house, all of that fear was lifted away. I parked just as far enough so that she wouldn't notice my car. I could see Lucy through her living room window, drinking what I presume was tea with her parents. As always, her dad sat on his cozy chair reading the paper while her mom made something, most likely tasty, to eat. It's like the kind of image you think of when picturing a perfect family. Realizing that I'd suddenly turned into the stalker made me briefly burst out in laughter. Ah, the sweet irony of life. Afterwards, I decided it was time to drive home again, since it had now started to get quite dark. On my way home, I became aware of the fact that I hadn't killed or hurt anyone for some time. Although, what stood out to me the most was that I didn't even feel like killing. It was like the bloodlust had been leached right out of my very core. And you know something? I wasn't bothered by it one bit, because I knew why it was happening. That thing called love was the culprit. My infatuation with Lucy had rid me of not only my loneliness, but my madness. By the time I got home, it had become really dark. I'm not really sure how late it was. I only knew that it was very late. The darkened sky seemed oddly grim as I drove home. Something was off. As I got to my neighborhood and closed in on my house, I could faintly make out something strange. At first glance, I didn't believe what I was seeing. It looked as if there was somebody standing in front of my living room window, just staring into my house. I turned off the car lights and locked the car doors, additionally making sure not to make a sound. Upon closer inspection, I was able to make out a vivid silhouette. It was definitely a person. But who would be... That's when it hit me, like a freight train to the face. There was only one person it could be. In that instance, I saw my chance. They hadn't noticed me, and their guard was off. I unlocked the door cautiously, and with some added haste, I retrieved my knife from the trunk of my car. I didn't bother to close the trunk, as it would have been too noisy. Once more, I peered at the intruder, who was still stalking my living room relentlessly, as if they were searching for something. I tightened my grip to keep the knife glued to my hand. Utilizing the thick darkness of the night and the cries of the insects, I quietly and carefully crept up behind the intruder, as they still hadn't noticed me. The intruder appeared unarmed, but I was still shivering. It's not that it was cold or anything, it just felt so weird. Even with the intruder right there ahead of me, the icy sweat that slid down the back of my neck made it feel like the pores in my skin had closed up. My breathing got slower and slower and calmer as I closed the distance between me and the intruder. And then, in a moment of pure adrenaline, I charged at the intruder full force to tackle them to the ground. My body was now moving on its own, and I used all of my strength to keep the intruder on the ground. I struggled ferociously, making sure to get on top of them. "Who are you?" I yelled aggressively, all the bottled up fear and rage emerging from within. It was so dark I couldn't see properly, and the intruder seemed to be wearing a mask. I said, "Who the fuck are you, and what do you want with me?" No reply. I was certain that this son of a bitch was mocking me, so I tore the mask from the intruder's face and proceeded to repeatedly stab their head multiple times. Up, down, up, down. That was the rhythm that my arm swung in as I thrusted the cold, sharp blade into the intruder's scalp. Soon after, I got a hold of myself and came back to my senses. Still sitting atop the intruder's corpse, I thought to myself, I did it. I laughed nervously, not yet quite able to fathom what I'd just done. I killed that psychopath, right? It's over now, right? Everyone's safe now? I would have let out a cry of relief, if not for what happened next. Checkmate. That word pierced right through my back, like a bullet that had been slowed down to ensure the pain would last. That wasn't the intruder that I had just killed. In my blinded rage, I hadn't once looked in the face of the person I had been forcefully impaling, but as my eyes met the bloody, brutalized face of my victim, their light faded, and the oxygen in my lungs abandoned me. The already dark and cold night had become darker and colder. That anonymous villain I had dubbed as my intruder was crouched down right behind me with their long, gruesome arms laced around my cold shell. I could feel their sharp breath blowing against the hairs on my neck. The flow of blood inside me changed directions, as every hair on my body felt like tiny insects digging into the surface of my skin. My eyes were locked on the crime I had just committed, as I stared in horror at the thick crimson liquid leaking from what had previously been my victim's head. And in the desperate hope that this was all some cruel nightmare, I asked with bitter tears slithering down my pale face, "Mom?" My insides collapsed. Why? Why was this happening to me? Is this punishment for the crimes I've committed? The darkness enthralled my entire body as I looked at the corpse I was sitting on top of. It was my mother's corpse. My bones felt like they were trying to free themselves of my body, and my heart was ready to tear in half. Then the intruder spoke once more. "You've always had such beautiful eyes, Jack." The intruder paused for a moment. "You have your mother's eyes. Now look into the eyes of that corpse. What do you see? I was in no state of mind to oppose the orders of the intruder. I just wanted it all to be a bad dream. What happened next almost made me faint. The relief, the pain, the fear, the anger, all the emotions you could think of swung back and forth in my brain like a drug addict on a swing. As I stared into the eyes of my victim once more, my heart almost shrunk. It was dark, and I must not have noticed before. The adrenaline that rushed through me must have clouded my senses. Those eyes, they weren't my mother's. As I focused harder and harder on what was left of the victim's face, I realized something that made me want to thank God. The woman I had just brutally murdered wasn't my mother. It was just some random lady that looked similar. How cruel, I muttered to myself with the most nervously crazed smile a human being could make. I couldn't see the face of the intruder since they were still crouched down behind me, but for some odd reason, I felt as though they were smiling. Yeah, I could feel the horrendous smile of theirs. I could feel its emptiness like a frozen knife slowly cutting into my flesh. At that point, I was all over the place, and I no longer had control over my bodily functions. Dad, is that you? My vocal cords shivered as I asked the only rational question that came to my mind. The voice of the intruder was a male voice. There haven't been any dominant or important males in my life to this point. In fact, the only man I know that would have been relevant to my life was my father. Sure, I never knew him, let alone what his voice sounded like, but he was the only person I could think of. My eyes went dry from all of the tears I had produced, and my body was somewhere between numb and in pain. The intruder spoke again. This time his voice lost all emotion, as if he were reading off a prompt. You should dispose of the body. Don't worry, that woman was single, and I doubt anyone will miss her. The intruder stood up and rested their hand on my head. And once again changing the tone in his voice, this time sounding caring and disturbingly nice, he concluded, Be safe, Jack. From that point on, my memory is pretty much blank. I only know that the intruder disappeared as quickly as he had appeared and that somehow I disposed of the body. I woke up late the next morning. I was feeling under the weather and decided to stay home. That day my mother was also free from work. She sat downstairs watching TV as she usually did on her free days. I wanted to believe that maybe what had happened last night was nothing more than some weird nightmare. To be honest with you, I nearly dismissed the previous night as a bad dream. That is, until I saw the note on my desk. I knew straight away who had written it. The handwriting was unfamiliar to me, which meant it must have been the intruder. I headed to the bathroom to take a quick shower and brush my teeth. The whole world seemed like it had been struck by an asteroid larger than the sun. I couldn't comprehend the situation whatsoever. The multitude of questions I had circling around inside my mind was almost painful. I still had no idea who the intruder was and what their intentions were. Even though I had asked the intruder if he was my father, he didn't answer. To top it off, there was no hesitation or flinch in the intruder's voice, and his motion seemed calm and fluid. Fuck, I had so many questions. Who the hell would play such a disturbing trick on me? I thought I had killed my own mother for fuck's sake, and that sick cunt just sat there like it was nothing. What the intruder did almost seemed condescending, like he was subliminally telling me that he owned me, that he could hurt me any time he wanted. And yet, what confused me even more than the intruder's still unknown identity was what he said. Be safe, Jack. What the hell did he even mean by be safe? Give me a fucking break. He's the one that put me in danger. He's the one that's been breaking into my house and smiling at me through my open front door like some freaking hungry animal. Just as I fell deeper into my thoughts, a sudden knock on the door startled me. Who is it? I said, shocked out of my skin for a moment. It's me, honey. Did I wake you? My mother's sweet voice nearly brought tears to my eyes. After the events of the previous night, it felt as though I hadn't heard her soft voice in forever. Oh no, don't worry about it. You just startled me a little, I answered. Oh, my bad, sweetheart. Come downstairs in 10. Breakfast will be ready, okay? Okay, thanks. I was so glad. I can't even begin to put into words how relieved I was that my mom hadn't been hurt, that I hadn't hurt her. Sure, I was probably being selfish, but I didn't know that other lady, and as crude as it may sound, her death wasn't really my problem. I couldn't care less about some stranger. What I needed were answers to at least some of my questions. What was the intruder's true identity? Was he my father? And if so, why come back into my life now? What was the point of doing all those psychotic things to me? What could he want from me? I desperately needed answers. At first, I had thought about going to Lucy's place after she got home from school, but instead I chose to stay home and think. I couldn't get involved in any of this. If something were to happen to her, I don't even know the things I'd do. A plan of action would be vital to finding a solution to my situation. And so, I spent the day in deep and lonely contemplation. I can't remember ever having to be so focused in my entire life. I wrote down my ideas and possible plans on paper, constantly changing positions on my bed, rolling back and forth and side to side, thinking, and thinking. After hours of digging a hole in my now tired and shriveled mind, one question stood out to me. Something I was shocked I hadn't thought about immediately. Actually, if I recall clearly, this was a question I used to ask constantly as a child. Over time, I must have gotten tired of never being able to find the answer to that specific question. As for the question itself, well, how should I put it? Having never met my father, not even once, I was always curious as to who he was. He never sent letters or postcards, and I didn't have any pictures of him. There was even a time where I thought that maybe I didn't have a father, but of course that's not possible. And with that, the question that always sat quietly in a dark corner of the back of my mind was, what happened to my father? By the end of the day, I'd come up with an idea. I wasn't sure if it would work, and it could even get me into trouble, but I had to get the answer to this question. I had this urgent feeling inside of me. Something was telling me that the intruder and my father had some kind of connection, and if the intruder was truly my father, then maybe I could stop him. All I needed was confirmation of the intruder's identity to even out the playing field. As for my idea, my first step in this psychological battle, well, it was pretty simple. But first, I'll have to let you in on a short story. You see, for the entirety of my life, I've lived in this small town. My mother also grew up here, and her parents before her, and so on. The town, though rather small and insignificant, has not been without its share of atrocities. Now I know what you're wondering. Aren't you the reason for this? Since I am the individual who is responsible for a large number of unsolved disappearances. Well, even though that may be true, even before I was old enough to have been killing, there were other psychos on the loose. One of which happens to have been so infamous, especially in this town, that they're regarded to as an urban legend. The serial killer was said to be so heartless and sadistic that even the devil himself rejected him from hell. The killer was never found though, and most say it's just a bunch of over-exaggerated fairy tales. But what if? What if the monster was real? What if he didn't die and instead got married and had a son? What I'm implying is, what if that killer's my father? I mean, it would make sense, right? We don't have any pictures of him, my mother never talks about him. My brain kept spinning. I felt like my head was going to explode. The thoughts that soared through my mind made me feel like some type of mad conspiracy theorist. But what if this really was the case? If that killer really was my father and now my intruder, it would explain a lot. For one, it could explain the reason why I became a serial killer myself. Maybe I somehow inherited it from him. Honestly, I don't even know if that's possible. Secondly, it would explain why the intruder was so obsessed with me, right? Unfortunately, the more I tried to make myself dig deeper, I ended up with new questions. Nevertheless, I wasn't about to allow my confusion to prevent me from winning this fight. I had to make my move swiftly. My plan had to be effective. Due to the unrest that this so-called urban legend created, our small town decided it was crucial to keep organized and frequently updated documents on its residents, which meant that all I had to do was go to the police station, show them my ID, and ask for the documents relating to my family. It seems too simple, doesn't it? But it's a small town, and the police know me, so there wouldn't be a problem. And if my father's identity was in those documents, well, then I would know that he couldn't possibly have been the killer. However, if his documents were missing, then that would give me the answer to my suspicions. If my father's documents aren't in those files at the police station, then that means the intruder is most definitely my father. And that would mean that my father is a viciously cunning serial killer, so sadistic that he even managed to become an urban legend. If so, I would have to tread lightly. He probably already knows about Lucy, which means I'm at a disadvantage right now, not to mention he can get into my house. If my father really is the intruder, and as dangerous as those stories say, then I have to do this alone. I can't allow my mother or Lucy to get involved. And of course, there's still one other issue. The note the intruder left. I still don't understand why he would want to do something like that. Wouldn't that give his identity away? Wasn't he afraid that I might call the police or bring other people? I guess for now I'm just going to sleep. I'm exhausted and I have a big day tomorrow. I have to go to the police station and find those documents. And then I have to do what that note said. Why is this happening to me? Intruder's note. Meet me at 11:30 p.m. in the park. Come alone. Okay, and that is all I'm going to read for this story. I still have 4 more parts to read, and that will be next weekend, and I'm so excited to read the rest of the story because I'm addicted. I'm leaving you guys on a cliffhanger, but I'm also leaving myself on a cliffhanger because I'm not going to read the story until I read it to you guys, so we all suffer for a week. Again, I'll have the author link down below as well as the story, so if you guys want to read ahead, you can, or you can be patient and read it with me next weekend. But anyways, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. Every time I record, my throat's like, nope. My voice is like, no. Everything's like, no. I haven't washed my hair in a long time, so I keep doing these stupid fucking things. Ponytails, that's what they're called. And they're just, my hair's just there, okay? It's just existing in this world. It made me wonder if I was some closeted My mom later confirmed that she hadn't made it for me. In my blinded rage, I had to get to the